Farm and Food with the Maryland Department of Agriculture. Sarah Servan, who you might know her through the Farmers Market Nutrition Program, she will be helping out today. She'll be my tech support, and I'm greatly appreciative of her support today. And so anyways, if you could keep your questions until the end, and if you have them in the chat, so we'll open it up for questions later on after the session. So either you could put them in the chat, or we could talk, raise your hand. Again, thank you for coming. We're really excited to be able to host this event today, and then also to offer the MFARM program. It was extremely popular the first time around when we released it in FY23. And so we're glad that we're able to provide that. We're able to have this event, this grant again for FY25. And so, yes, it's we're seeing a lot of interest in this program just because of what's been happening on the federal level. And I will say, since with the termination of the local food purchasing agreement. So if you are a food bank out there, and if you had been getting fresh product from either the Maryland Food Bank or the Capital Area Food Bank, that program is going away at the end of this year. And so this is a state program, the Maryland Food and Agricultural Resiliency Mechanism Grant Program, which is very similar to the LFPA, but then there is some little differences to it. So we'll get started. And there we go. So in FY23 and 24, we end up giving 8 nonprofits and food banks. They received $200,000 to purchase from 15 providers from the local farm and fish program. As I said, it's a very competitive grant program. And the purpose behind that is to help those who are food insecure while providing market for our farmers and seafood providers. Please take note that the grant application is due May 2nd. And this is just some of the snapshot of some of the grantees that we funded the first round. This is a brand new grant. We had the first round in 23, 24, and this is going to be the second round that we're offering it. And so you can just tell, here's a quick snapshot of some of the projects that were funded the first round. We have from Western Maryland to Prince George's County to Baltimore City. And so all of the products that were purchased were from Maryland farmers. And if you want to see a full list of the grantees that were that received funding, it is on the Maryland's Department of Agriculture's website. Okay. So the funding amount hasn't changed. As I said, there's a high demand, but there's only $200,000 available. It is general funds, and we do have that funding for this year. So we're very excited to be able to offer it, and it is state funding. The minimum request that you can make is $5,000. The maximum request is $40,000. And the grant project duration is from July 1st of this year to November 30th. What we saw in our first round is most of the funding was expended within the first year because of just the way the grant is this year is falling, and it's in the middle of the growing season. We wanted to extend it a few more months. And so instead of having it a year, the grant agreement, it would be a little bit more than a year. So again, it's from July 1st until November 30th. If you think you could expend the funds sooner, that's perfectly acceptable. Okay, so one of the priorities is agricultural products and seafood products need to be purchased from the Certified Local Farm and Fish Directory. We have both seafood providers and farmers on that directory. And who can apply? Who's eligible? We have the Maryland Food Banks, you got charitable emergency food providers, and mission-driven nonprofits. Just a little quickly about those who may not be familiar with the Certified Local Farm and Fish Program, but essentially it is a state mandate that state agencies and public four-year universities purchase 20% of their food 20% of their food from producers and seafood providers in the Certified Local Farm and Fish Directory. The idea is to support agriculture and seafood industries. The producers need to have a nutrient management plan. The agriculture producers need to have a nutrient management plan in order to become part of the certified program. And then our seafood providers, which is usually the processors, they need to have a title fish license. And then there's often confusion when you say certified, that it does not relate to USDA good agricultural practices. It relates to being certified as part of this program. And all our farms farm within the relationship of the Chesapeake Bay, and this is just one way to recognize this program. Our farmers and the hard work that they're doing is to buy from farms that have, that are part of the Certified Local Farm and Fish program. Now, you're probably thinking, well, that's a state program, it's an institution program, but then what does this have to do with MFARM? And that's the key, is that those farmers, and so if you're working with producers, they need to be part of the Certified Local Farm and Fish program. It's really easy to apply, and we have this information online, and it's free for producers to apply. They just need to verify that, and we have our nutrient management specialists that also verify that they do have a nutrient management plan. If you do not have a nutrient management plan, then, and you do qualify to have one, then you should be getting one, and we will take measures to help educate those that need a nutrient management plan, because our department within MDA works very closely with the nutrient management specialists within the agency. And so we'll make sure that you'll have the proper resources that you needed in order to get your plan written. Okay, so what are some of the new items this year for the MFARM program? Is that we didn't ask this last time, but we are asking this time, is that nonprofits must be registered as a charity with the Maryland State Secretary of State. For your W-9s, they need to be signed within the past 2 years, and the address on the W-9 must match the address of the organization that's applying. That's very key, because if they don't match, you don't get paid. It's just one of the state things that the state requires. And then also we're asking this year is if you already have an established relationship with producers that are from the Certified Local Farm and Fish, that are on the Certified Local Farm and Fish Directory, is that they provide some letter of support. So it's a verification that you do have that relationship. Either you've bought product from them in the past, or maybe you even have a contract with them. And so it's just verifying that you have that kind of relationship. You don't need to have a relationship in order to get a grant, but it's highly encouraged, because as I said, this grant is going to be extremely competitive. And if you have a working relationship with a provider in the Certified Local Farm and Fish Directory, that will be very beneficial for you. Okay, again, the priority is purchasing food, agriculture, and seafood products. That is the purpose of this program. The first go around, we saw a lot of applications that they're either brand new, and they're like, oh, we think this is a really good idea, and we need $100,000. That doesn't work for this program. Think of this program as a supplemental program to what you're already doing. Because again, we saw a lot of projects, they're asking for a large amount of money for staff, and not a whole lot of food products were being purchased. And so this is not about that. This is a supplemental program. So 80% of the funding will go towards food, right? And then also we're allowing 20% of supporting distribution and or operation expenses. And so again, the max is $40,000. 80% of that goes towards food purchases from those in the Certified Local Farm and Fish Directory. And then 20% can go towards distribution or operation expenses. That also includes indirect expenses. So when you're thinking about your budget, these are just some of the things you need to think about as you work through your budget. There is no match requirement. Another question that we're asking this year is if you have the infrastructure to support fresh local food. And so oftentimes some of the food banks we've experienced that they know how to do non-perishable food really, really well. Local food is different, right? And especially perishable local food. So do you have the infrastructure? Do you have cold storage? Do you have, a food safety plan in place? And so these are some of the questions that we're asking this year, just based on our experience of what we had with the first go around. Another thing that we're asking this year is quantifiable measurable impact, quantifiable measurable impact, because we have to report on this program, right, to the General Assembly. So we are like, what's the impact of this grant in the communities? Who are the people who are impacted, and what is the impact, right? So for example, some of the things, we have a bunch of examples within the application itself. And so we need to know, again, can't emphasize enough, quantifiable measurable impacts, right? So a good example would be, the food bank provided access free of charge to 3,000 pounds of locally grown food at this particular location, and how many, reaching 1,100 residents. As opposed to, which would need improvement, would like, we just want to support local farms and decrease food waste. What is the measurable impact in that sentence? Because we can't really quantify that. So when you're thinking about applying, think about who will be receiving the product, right? How many times a week, boxes, pounds, we don't distinguish, you can do a food box, we saw food box programs, or it's just bulk distribution. But again, is being able to measure your impact in the community and who's being served by this program. Oops. Oh, this was quicker than I thought. Okay, so we can open it up to questions real quick, and then what will also happen is I will go through, just show you One Stop, because the application is on One Stop this year, and which might be, I'll go through this really quickly, just so you become familiar with the application itself and what to expect for when you're on One Stop. So with this, once you get into One Stop, you'll see that this is the public profile, right? And all the information that I just presented in the PowerPoint presentation is on One Stop itself. We don't have a NOFA, notice of funding allocations. So all the information, again, all the information that I just talked about is on One Stop itself. So it talks about the eligibility, how you need to be registered with the Secretary of State, your W-9s, your relationships, again, funding availability, the formula funding. And then the one thing I didn't mention is that what we'll do this year is 80% of the funds will be dispersed upon the execution of the grant agreement between MDA and the applicant. And then the remaining funds will be dispersed after the grant recipient has submitted your final report, your final program and financial report. There are no matching funds. There will be, you will need to record your expenditures, and then also submit a final report to MDA. And then here is like, you click here to apply. And then if you haven't signed on to One Stop, here's instructions. It's very intuitive and straightforward in how to create an account on the One Stop. And then also we've included some resources that you might find helpful here. Is SSTAT, which was required last year. And so you'll need to prove that you're in good standing with SSTAT. Excuse me. And then how to search for SSTAT, the directory of the of the local farm and fish providers. What's in season? So oftentimes a lot of the food banks will ask, if you're not familiar with buying local food, is like, I want to buy strawberries in the fall. Well, strawberries are not available in the fall. And so we have a what's in season chart of letting you know about what product is generally available within Maryland. And so the growing season, excuse me, is usually from May until November, depending on the product. Of course, depending on where you are within the state, there will be some variations of that timeline, excuse me. And then we also have a sample grant agreement. So if you are fortunate enough to become a grantee, there's a sample grant agreement. And then also in terms of reporting of what is expected of you for reporting, what we want to see is invoices. And then also like who was the provider, like how often it was distributed, that type of thing. And so you could, we have a sample grant report up there, so you can look at it. And then also what happens after you submit your application, which is pretty straightforward. This is a normal grant application. So, you know, you're going to be notified. And then if you do receive a grant, then you'll be required to sign a grant agreement and then also reporting. Again, additional information is down here. So that is considered what is on the public profile of One Stop. And then if you go to, okay. So then if you create an account and you want to sign, go through and sign up on the application, you just click on my dashboard. And then you just click on the grant itself, the grant application. And then this would show up in terms of the grant application. So this is the grant application in which you need to fill out, and you're going to need to be required to upload files into this application. And it also auto saves. So you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about saving because it will save itself. So again, the application itself, this is pretty straightforward. It's your standard grant agreement information, your data fields are required. And then we're asking like what type of applicant you are. Are you a food bank, emergency food provider, or are you a nonprofit? And so you'll see as you walk through the application, as you go through the application, is that if you click on certain items, you may be asked for additional information. So for example, if you say you're a food bank or emergency food provider, we're going to ask you whether or not you're part of the Maryland Food Bank Network or the Capital Area Food Bank Network. Okay, and then we ask this also question is like working with, does your organization have experience working or distributing fresh local products? If you say no, that's fine. But if you say yes, we're going to ask you for more information. Like, how have you worked? Like, what is your experience? Do you have cold storage, as I mentioned before, infrastructure to support local food? Because what we saw in the initial go around is people see this, oftentimes they see this funding opportunity and they may not have the infrastructure for local product. They just see it as, which, I understand. They want to buy additional food to feed to feed the food insecure individuals in their area. I completely understand. But then again, working with local food, there's a little bit of different nuances there too. And then, so is your organization a registered charity with the state, is the Secretary of State? So if you say no, that's one. But then, as a requirement, you need to upload your proof of registration. And so this is where you would, you would visit the charities, right? The Secretary of State charities, and then search for your name and take a screenshot and then upload it into this field here. And then same thing with SSTAT. Well, we call it SSTAT, but it's called Maryland State Department of Assessment and Taxation. So are you in good standing? If you say no, that's one thing, but you will not be eligible if you say no. So I would encourage you to check it out before you apply, whether or not you are in good standing, because you will need to be in good standing in order to receive funding from the state. So again, when you say yes, this information will show up. And then this is where you need to upload your W-9. And then also, if you have a 990 or 990N, you can upload it here too, which would be extremely, that's what we want to see. Oh, I'm sorry. SStat. Okay, this is right. So Secretary of State, and this is the SStat in which your certificate of good standing with the state. And then, so then you could always track where you are with up here with the tabs. And then for the second tab, then you're looking at again, who point of contact, if you're program contact, or you could be the same financial contact, right? So we ask, oftentimes in nonprofits, the program contact is the same as the financial. And if not, then, then we ask you for different information if you click no here, which will say no. And then again, just some basic information about your organization, because we want to know who you are, right? We want to get to know, like, what's the purpose of your organization? Who do you serve? How many volunteers do you have? That type of thing. Because again, we have a lot of interest in this program, and there's a lot of nonprofits out there. So we just want to get, the department wants to know more about you. And then also, this will go in front of a review committee too. And so they may not know who you are. So it's good to, let people know who you are. Again, projects, start date, end date, your description. Again, this is basic grant information of what you hope to do. And then if you have any established relationships, again, previously in my PowerPoint presentation, if you don't have a relationship now, you may want to start forming one. And if you do, we're going to be asking, like, well, who do you work with and what do you do? What's the relationship with that provider? The Chesapeake, the provider within the Chesapeake Local Farm and Fish Program. And if you say no, then you say no. Again, this is getting back to, again, the anticipated outcomes and measurable impacts. I provided a couple examples, but here are more examples you can use as reference of what we're looking for when we're looking, for the type of information for outcomes and measurable quantifiable impacts. So we kind of go into a lot of details just because it's helpful for us. So when we need to go report, I'm like, well, does this program really do anything, or who's benefiting from this program, right? So then we could take that back and say, look at, this is a good investment for the community. And then project budget. So then, obviously you'll be clicking yes, because this is the purpose of the program. And then, so it's going to be asking you detailed information about this and how you go about doing it. Now, I will say, there is a built-in formula in here. So let's say you said amount requested is, if you make a mistake, you'll get this, you can't go over $40,000 or, and then you'll get a notification within the application itself, right? Or even let's say you did 50, right? Again, you'll get that. And then for, and also it can tell you if you asked more for more than 20% of items other than distribution or staffing, then it will tell you you need to go back and fix it yourself. So then as you go through the application and you think about the items for the budget, is like, do you want funds for transportation? If you say no, okay. If you say yes, you put in your estimated miles and what you think, and then that you're agreeing that you're going to do this to be delivering the product itself. If you say yes to staffing, it'll ask you, like, who's the staffer, the title, the qualifications, the resume, what will they be doing, and the date they will be doing, and that type of thing. If you've done any federal grant applications before, the feds ask for this kind of information. If you need any materials or supplies, again, we want to know, like, price per unit cost, number of pieces, when you're going to plan to use that information. And same thing with or yeah, so that's supplies. And this, all of this will be automatically calculated. So let's say you put in the cost of like $1 and 100 and okay, I don't know if this is working. Yes. So then you'll see that it automatically calculates, and this is for all the field line items that you have. And then you'll see that, wow, it's $10,000, right? And I had asked if you went up here and you've asked for $35,000 worth of food. So then, you know, you'll have to go back and make adjustments to say, okay, then it's $100, right? And then same, and then, you know, as you saw in the other ones, if you say yes to contractual or consulting costs, same info, you know, you'll have to fill out more details there. And then other costs, and then it adds it up automatically. Which it should, and there might be a glitch there. So let's see here. Okay, it should be add up automatically. So the total funding request here should be 35,100. So I have to go back and tell our IT people. So that should automatically do that. And then here you're just acknowledging, you know, that you provided the information that are true and accurate, and then also a checklist to make sure you have all the appropriate letters of support. And then click next. Then you'll be able to review the information, and then you click submit. And that's it. So it's pretty straightforward in terms of what you need to do. And it's just getting the detailed information on how you want to, you know, what items you're going to be asking for, you know, for the project itself. And with that, I'll stop sharing. And Sarah, do we have any questions in the chat?
Yeah, there were a few questions. The first one, I think it might have been answered, but I just want to confirm. Is there a quick link for the Certified Local Farm and Fish Directory? Is it just the one-stop link?
Yes, so there should be one in the, there is one in the public profile. Yes, so let me share that again. So there is one in the application itself, and then if you go onto the public profile, it's this one right here that will go to the directory itself. And it's taken a really long time.
Okay. I think that's a link that was dropped in the chat too, so that's great.
Okay, cool.
And then another question, does the Maryland grown produce bought by the grant have to go back to Maryland food insecure residents, or can it go to residents in the greater DC area?
Maryland.
And then if another question was, I think it was around the which food bank are you part of? But they asked, what if you're part of all three?
That's fine.
Okay.
All three. I don't know of the third one. So I know of Maryland Food Bank and the Capital Area Food Bank. And then there are some independent food banks that which are not part of the network, which is perfectly fine. We just want to know if you're just part of the network or not.
And then also, is this a reimbursement grant or upfront payment?
Right. So 80% will be upfront, and then 20% will be dispersed based on your final report and your program and financial report. So what we're trying to do is give you, because we know, like, in terms of, you know, reimbursements and costs and stuff like that. So yes, we will give you 80% upfront once the grant agreement is signed, and if you receive, you know, if you're approved for funding.
Oh, and I just got clarity on the other, all three. It was, what if they're a food pantry nonprofit and emergency food provider?
Oh, okay, that's fine.
That's okay. Okay. And then If we have an agreement with a local farm that's not on the certified local farm and fish registry, should we still indicate that information and get a letter of support from them in order to show our capacity?
Right, so if they're not in, good question, if they're not in the directory, get them in the directory. Tell them, send them the link and tell them they need to sign up, because we will not be approving applications if they are not in the directory. I mean, yes, and so if you are working with a local provider, then yes, ask them to sign up to become a part of the program. Because that's one of the purpose is because the farmers who are in the directory, they need to have a nutrient management plan. And so it's this program is a recognition of those farmers who do have a nutrient management plan. It is required by law. So in theory, they're supposed to have one if they are eligible to be in there. So you have to sell more than at least $2,500 more of product in sales, and then 8 animal units.
Okay, and then another question is, do we have to spend 20% on non-food, or can we spend more on foods?
You can spend more on food. You can spend all, 40,000 on food if you want to.
Great. And does the partnership with the farm need to be a paid partnership, or could they have donated directly to us previously?
They could donate a product. That's fine. It doesn't have to be paid. But I will, the funding will allow for paid. So that's something you may want to keep in mind. Yeah, to pay the farmers for their product. It's highly encouraged. And then also, we also have another program. So if you are, if you're not part of we have a tax donation program. And so as a nonprofit, you can sign up to receive product from a farmer who has donated product to you, and so they could get a tax credit for that. I could give you some more information about that.
It looks like Audrey Watt, you have your hand raised. Go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah. One of my questions was about if you have a partnership with somebody that's not on the registry. So like our organization has a partnership with a nonprofit farm. And so we have like a mutual partnership there. So it was more of, and they're not on the registry, but my question was, should we indicate that and get a letter of support from them to show that we have the capacity to manage those fresh produce relationships, just with, like, we could grow to find one that is within the registry. Does that make sense? Because you're talking about do you have the capacity to manage fresh produce and from local farms? And like we do, we would just need to build a new relationship with a new farm.
Well, the nonprofit can be part of the registry, part of the directory.
Gotcha.
Yeah, in fact, we encourage the nonprofit farms to be part.
Okay.
In fact, they still need to have a nutrient management plan. So.
Okay.
You could go that way, they could sign up to become part of the directory, or if you want to explore another relationship, that's fine too, for those that are in the directory. And yeah, if you get a letter of support from the nonprofit farm saying, yes, they do have the capacity to, and the infrastructure to handle fresh perishable product, that's fine too. So does that help?
And then a couple other questions, Karen. Is there a guess as to what portion of grants will go to previous grantee partners versus new grantees?
We have no idea. It just depends what comes in.
And
I'm sorry, I just put in the link for the food donation program. So if you want to explore that, if you're already working with farmers and they're donating to you and they haven't if they haven't taken advantage of the food donation, that would be great. Oh, and I see Willie Lance. We do not know right now, I'm sorry, Sarah, in terms of funding, if there will be funding in 26, this is all dependent upon the state budget. So that's why we're trying to get this out the door for the fiscal year 25. And hopefully we'll know by next week if we have funding for 26.
Can religious institutions apply?
I'm sorry?
Can religious institutions apply?
Yes, we have had religious, faith-based organizations that have applied. Yes, and I think the line, I can't remember. Now the challenge is it's going to be your W-9, depending on how the faith-based is set up. And so that is something you'll need to take talk to your administration about.
And then it looks like Debbie Gibbs has her hand raised. Go ahead, Debbie.
Yes, regarding the W-9 for faith-based, what would be, what would be the ramifications? Because we're not registered, I'm not sure if we're registered with the as a city. Like how does that work for faith-based organizations?
Right. So faith-based organizations, because you guys also have a different tax status too. And we did accept applications from faith-based because organizations last year, just because you do normally, faith-based have robust food pantries available for their community, and they do a lot of good in their community. I'd say go ahead and apply, and I can't remember off the top of my head how we dealt with that, to tell you the truth. But I know that the W-9, if you could get the W-9 to match the address, that would be ideal. We could work with you if you should receive the funding, then we'll figure something out to make it work. But it's actually with the faith-based is kind of complicated, to tell you the truth, because of just how their tax status is and the way they're set up. And usually faith-based, you may have the address may be elsewhere within the state. Yes.
No, ours would be able to match, but I don't know if we're registered as a state charity. So how would, do you have specific guidelines for the faith-based institutions that might apply?
Right. So the charity, that is new, and the Secretary of State was really encouraging us to, they essentially said, make that a requirement. I think probably reach out to the Secretary of State. I don't have an answer for that, but I could also look into that too for you.
Okay, that would definitely be appreciated. The other thing is, I don't believe we have a direct relationship with, the food providers, but if we belong to the Capital Area Food Bank and they have a relationship, would that count? Or does it have to be, we don't have a direct relationship, like we have not directly purchased products, from local providers, although we'd like to.
Right. So in that case, if you have a relationship with the Capital Area Food Bank, I would reach out to the Capital Area Food Bank because they have worked with many farmers as part of the LFPA program. And then there's probably cross-reference. Not all farmers were part of LFPA. I'm sorry, weren't part of the Certified Local Farm, but they do have a portfolio of a bunch of farms that they worked with. And so, yes, then get the list of farms and maybe they can provide inroads with you and make, create that link for an for that relationship.
Okay, and then will we get a letter of support from the Capital Area Food
It
Bank?
would come from the farmer.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Karen, there's a couple questions on what are the reporting requirements?
Right. So the reporting requirements, we'll be asking for invoices, so that make sure you keep track of the invoices that you get from the producer. And then so depending on what kind of program you set up with the producer, we saw a lot of food banks or community food boxes, or community refrigerators, they could be delivering once a week, once a month. And so what we want to know is, how was that fund used, right? And so you need to keep track of it. So think about your reporting, your financial system too. And so you need to keep your receipts and then upload the receipts into the report. And then also talk about, so there's that aspect of the reporting, the mechanics of that. But then also we want to know is like how many people, again, going back to the quantifiable results, right? What are your outcomes? What were your outcomes and what was the impact, right? And so then we want to see, how much product and who was served, and it doesn't have to be just raw, if you have meals, you're incorporating the product into the meals. We had one grantee that did that last year, which is perfectly acceptable. We want to know how many people were served because, they had, carrots, local carrots or potatoes and, and it's not just fruits and vegetables too, because we also have protein producers in the directory. So like eggs and milk and meat, that type of thing. So we want to know all of that so we can understand, the breadth of what is happening in the community.
And then one other question, I'm just confirming, so do our organizations need to have a nutrient management plan?
The farmers do, not the nonprofits. Well, if you're a nonprofit farm, you do. I mean, yes. If you're a nonprofit, and you could be a nonprofit farm applying, which is acceptable too. But then if you're a food bank, you don't need to have a nutrient management plan, but the farmer needs to have one. And they need, again, it goes back to being able to be in the directory.
Can you
Thanks.
explain the difference between emergency food provider and nonprofit?
That was what was in the legislation, and maybe somebody. The Maryland Food Bank is online, or Capital Area Food Bank. You could probably explain this better than I can. John, go ahead.
I'm guessing that emergency food providers are those who receive funding for food through the EFSP grant program. Is that what the intent was?
Okay.
And I think
great.
a lot of folks on here have gotten EFSP funding, maybe even some administer it. So
Okay. Great, thanks. And then John has also offered to make the connections for those that are within the Maryland Food Bank network. So thank you for doing that.
And what does EFSP stand for, please?
the Emergency Food and Shelter Program, it's currently also on hold. It's federal funding for emergency food and shelter.
Thank you.
I believe I got all the questions in the chat. So if there are additional questions or folks want to come off mute and ask questions, you can go ahead and do that as well.
It's hard. I mean, honestly,
So I see the question from Christina, is there a difference in whether we apply as a non? No, there isn't. Not for this year. Okay, thank you. We're also thinking about, since we had entities, when we say nonprofits that were not a food bank or emergency food provider, but they were feeding food insecure individuals. So that's why the category nonprofit was established. Danielle?
It's like, yeah.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My question has to do with the portion within the directory that speaks to the fishermen, watermen, if you will, and how an organization that is kind of far from Baltimore and Annapolis could actually get their hands on some of those frozen protein items
Right. So,
through this grant initiative.
right,
Mhm.
right,
Thank
exactly.
you.
Thank you for the question. So so the Chesapeake invasive species providers, those are the seafood providers that are in the directory. There's 4 or 5 of them, and there's another one coming online.
Okay.
And so they process the blue catfish. So the invasive species that solely is focused on the blue catfish.
Mhm.
And so they may be able to deliver, or you might have to go pick up the product.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, sorry, let me get back on camera. And so if I have to pick up, then I should probably account for that within the transportation piece
Correct.
of the grant, correct?
Correct. Correct.
Okay. And in doing that, would you want calculated the distance?
Yes. Yep. You're
Okay.
going to have to, yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Right. And I know with the Maryland Food Bank through the LFPA program, they did buy a lot of catfish, blue catfish. And if you're not familiar with the blue catfish and how it's invasive, I could give you a quick summary of it. So the blue catfish is an invasive species that is eating all the good things that we love in the Bay, between the crabs, the oysters, the clams. And so it's an invasive species. We think like there could be over like 100 million pounds of biomass in the Bay. And so what we, through this program and also through the LFPA, was we made blue catfishes. You could buy blue catfish from these processors. And, you know, those that have experience, you know, when you say blue catfish or when you say catfish, people automatically think of the bottom dweller catfish.
Mhm.
And you're right, John. It's a great tasting fish. It's the
Okay.
mid-column dweller catfish, and it's light, it's white, it's firm, and it's really, really good. We often serve it as samples at some of our the department serves it as samples at some of the events that we have. And we've heard really positive feedback from about the blue catfish.
Okay, well, thank you for answering my question.
Sure.
We're looking forward to applying and receiving. Yeah, I mean, you got to claim this manifestation, right?
Exactly.
So, thank you for your time.
Sure. Thank you very much. Any other questions? No? Okay. Well, you have my email address. I'll put it in the chat again. And feel free to reach out to me if you experience any questions as you're filling out the application. So I'm around, and thank you for coming today. And this will be recorded. Well, it was recorded, and then we'll post it on our website, and we'll send out an email letting you know that's available if you need any further reference. And we'll also make the PowerPoint slides available too.